history.
Well, the entire Bible is the prophets and people being killed for not submitting to corrupt government. And
Absolutely.
the king says, bow down to, you know, Booblebub or whatever. And he says, no, so get into the lion's den, or I'm going to crucify you upside down, or I'm going to sell you into slavery. The whole Bible is about resisting tyranny.
Absolutely, and I make that statement in the course of my address. I preached a 4-part series based on the book, and I made that very observation that if you look at biblical history, you go back to the Old Testament, even into the New, perhaps a majority, can't say that equivocally, but perhaps a majority of the stories of the Bible deal with someone resisting civil authority.
I think almost, I'd say 80%. I mean, look at John the Baptist getting his head cut off. I mean, can you think of anybody? I mean, Moses didn't do what Pharaoh said. I mean, the whole thing's a sick joke. It's a joke. The entire Bible is about resisting tyranny.
Exactly right. And again, that's why I say that this book is so needful. And as you noted, every tyrant in history has used Romans 13, especially if there's a Christian people involved, to try and subjugate the folks into their wishes. Hitler did it. We know that this is a favorite passage of Scripture from those who would like to tyrannize us and to enslave us. This book, Romans 13. Alex, I just don't know of anything right now that's out there. That's why we put this together. And in my frustration as a pastor for over 35 years, in dealing with churches and preachers and Christian people, and hearing this over and over and over again, that and the 501c3 incorporation status, those two things have subjugated the church to Caesar more than any two things I can think of. And that's why this book is so necessary.
Well, let's go over a few of the accounts in the Bible of people being evil and resisting murderers and tyrants, according to the modern preachers. And then let's go through some of the passages, because, I mean, there's just so many. I can't even remember. Who will rise up for me against the wicked one? On and on and on about if you see evil being done and you don't try to resist it, then the blood's on your hands. I mean, let's go through a bunch of those verses if you've got them there in front of you, Pastor, on the other side. And then we'll jam in some calls as well and continue with calls throughout the end of the broadcast. And the pastor leaves us at T-minus 25 minutes. Stay with us. We are back live into hour number 3, covering the incredible treason. But see how, I told you 5 years ago, hey, they're going to have a council of 13. Bills will now originate, at least on spending and cutting, but then that's pretty much the whole government. Harry Reid says it affects everything, including guns, and Larry Pratt agrees. But imagine if I'd have told you 5 years ago, they'll have a council of 13 with the president at its head, and the bills will originate there, and there's no filibustering or amendments. And then if you don't vote for their recommendation, that's how it's worded, then they just implement whatever they want. It's like, you have free will as long as you do what I say. I mean, I can't believe it's that naked, and that it's not a bigger issue. But see, we're becoming accustomed to this. Growing up, I like any teenager, saw a lot of racy stuff, did some wild things, and I was always taken to church when I was young, and I thought, this is all just goody two-shoes. People that obsess over don't do anything bad because it leads to a lot worse stuff. And the older I've gotten, I've realized that's absolutely true. It's societies that are pious and into being focused and clean and good are not because these are wimps, ladies and gentlemen. It's because they don't want their children destroyed. It's because you, in fact, normally see very pious cultures come out of giant, murderous, long wars and corruption. And once they get out of it, they go, whoo, how did we ever get into that? Most of their family's dead. Mama, daddy, totally wiped out. Study history, and they go, we are getting ourselves in order. Okay, and that's what being straight and strong is all about. And I'm not even saying I'm perfect, but I at least know, and I'm ashamed of the bad things I do unintentionally. You catch yourself saying something, doing something, and if you do the things I'm talking about, you go, Alex, you're a great guy. That's no big deal. No, it is a big deal, because little things turn into big things. And, they sell evil like it's a sexy devil cheerleader, like the bumper sticker, and it's fun and it's cool. Just like Madison Avenue advertises their Hollywood drugs. Illegal drugs are fun. They're just advertising CIA products for you. No, it's not fun turning into a crack whore or going to prison. I love the old Pinocchio, one of the only good Disney movies out there with a good message. You know, they get them to knock out some windows, drink some beer, smoke some cigars, you know, gamble, whatever, and then they turn into donkeys and get loaded on a ship to be slaves. And it's real simple, but that's how it works. They get you in peer pressure. They get you in a corrupt culture. Now, see, I'm preaching. I get a preacher on, pastor, presidential candidate, Constitution Party, Chuck Baldwin, and I start preaching and ranting. It's just that now I've studied history. Now I've learned a lot more. And I think if you just tell kids up front, yeah, you'll think it's fun, sex, drugs, things like that up front. I never really got into the drug part, but I saw it with friends. And I had friends that were looked like John Wayne football players, wealthy families, whole future ahead of them. Next time I saw them 2 years later, crackheads in South Dallas. I mean, guys that had the beauty queen. I mean, guys that had it all. Guys, we'd go out to get pizza, and women were just running up, and just zombie crackheads, prison, some of them dead years later. Now I am ranting. Sorry, going back to the pastor. Pastor, please, shotgun through Romans 13, what it really says versus the other passages and stories in the Bible.
Well, yeah, right, Alex. Thanks a lot. And yeah, you mentioned right before the break, let's talk about some of the examples in the Bible of those who resisted unlawful authority. And let's think about Daniel, one of the great stories of the Scripture. Every Sunday school boy and girl hears about Daniel in the lion's den. Well, you know, how did he get to the lion's den? He got there because his civil authority government put him there. Well, why did they put him there? Because he resisted what they told him to do. He said no. In that particular case, they said you can't pray for X amount of days publicly, and even privately. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll open my windows. I'm going to pray like I do every day. They threw him in the lion's den. Of course, God protected him and saved him from the lion's den. But that's not the point. The point really wasn't that God saved him from the lions. The point was he was willing to go into the lion's den in defiance of his civil authority. The same book, you got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were commanded to bow down and worship the image of the state. They said, we can't do that. We'll have no other gods before us, the very first commandment. We're not going to bow to the state. The state is not our God. So they threw him in the burning fiery furnace. And again, we talk about in Sunday school that God delivered them from the burning fiery furnace. But again, that's not the point. The point is they went into the burning fiery furnace. Why did they go in? Because they defied government. They were not willing to submit their conscience to the authority of the state.
And this was the old terror of government. We're going to throw you in with starving lions if you don't do what we say. We're going to throw you into a smelting pit if you don't do what we say. I mean, the same garbage today. Go ahead.
Yeah, even the book of Judges. I mean, people read the book of Judges, whether it's Gideon or Samson or Jephthah or whoever it is. Read the entire book of Judges. What do we find? We find the people of God being tyrannized, being subjugated by some oppressive regime, and God raising up a deliverer called a judge. Sometimes they were just a common person that had no particular position or authority, but God put it on their heart to deliver their people from that tyranny that they were under. And so they rose up, God helped them, God gave them strength, and they delivered the people from this oppressive regime, whatever it might happen to be. That's the entire book of Judges. You get to the New Testament, you come to Simon Peter, when the civil government over him said, we command you not to speak and preach anymore in his name. And he said, sorry, we must obey God rather than man. And they took the cat o' nine tails on the back for that, went to prison for that. But they said no. They defied civil authority. The entire Bible,
same thing with Paul. Fast forward, past 70 years later, 100 years later, being burned at the stake in the arena, being thrown to lions because they wouldn't. It's the entire Bible. And that shows you just how deceived or openly wicked most of these little devils are up there on the pulpits. I mean, these are little demons.
Well, a lot of them have been they have been deceived. They've been taught it in seminary or Bible college. It's the accepted doctrine to teach. They haven't thought it through. Yeah, some of them are demons. They are, but some of them are just deceived. They just don't know any better. That's what they were taught, and they haven't studied it through for themselves. And that's why Tim and I wrote the book. Tim, again, is my constitutional attorney son, and we collaborated on this book. By the way, can I give my website so people can get a hold of it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was about to get to that. Go ahead.
It's you can't get it in bookstores. It's chuckbaldwinlive.com. That's Chuck Baldwin Live, all one word, live.com. And it's very easy. You can see the links, and you can click on it, order online, etc. But that's why we wrote this book, is because of this indoctrination that's going on out there, and that in conjunction with the 501c3 corporation status of churches has completely neutered the pulpits. That's why they won't take a stand. And these people that are listening out there, and all denominations of people are listening right now, and you go to church on Sunday and you come back and you say to Alex on the phone, or you say to your friends, you know, why doesn't my preacher take a stand? Why won't he talk about this? Why doesn't he get involved in this? And this is why. This is why. The 501c3 tax-exempt status, by the way, our Liberty Fellowship here in Montana is not a 501c3 fellowship.
By the way, didn't exist until the 50s. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or the freedom of the press, on and on and on. First Amendment, they said, oh, you can still be a church that's tax exempt outside of law because we can't put a law on you. We have no jurisdiction, back to what you were talking about earlier. Or you can be a charitable organization. And the big denominations ordered all their churches to file under it. And now the charitable organization has no free speech. When it doesn't get any clearer than the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or of the press, or of the people to peaceably assemble. I mean, it just goes on and on. Read the First Amendment. It's all right there. And now I've had friends come to me from their Baptist churches, their Catholic churches, you name it. Mormons have sent me the letters where just across the board, they are told, do not even talk about politics or your views, even at church or at any church function. I mean, they're even telling now their flocks don't have free speech. I mean, these are like Soviet cults.
Yeah, the fear of losing their tax-exempt status is what's causing that. And Romans chapter 13, in the erroneous interpretation of that passage, is giving them the spiritual justification for it. That's the double tandem that is destroying America. If we could get the churches and the preachers to stand up for the biblical principles of liberty, the same kind of principles that Jonas Clark, he was the pastor of the church at Lexington on April 19, 1775, when the British troops came marching through to do two things. They were going to arrest Sam Adams and John Hancock, and they were going to seize the cache of firearms that was stored at Concord. And when they got to Lexington, it was Pastor Jonas Clark and the congregants, the male congregants of his church, that were the Minutemen that fired the shot heard round the world, and the war for independence began in the United States. And and that was the kind of spirit that the Black Regiment preachers all personified back at that time. They all understood this. I mean, if we had this erroneous, fallacious interpretation of Romans 13 in the colonies, like we have today in America, we would still be a crown colony of Great Britain.
Well, that's why the social engineers 100 years ago first thing targeted the takeover of the churches and the teaching of Romans 13. I mean, they knew they had to get rid of real Christianity in this country, and they've replaced it with all these gold, little shiny glitter bug people in, fancy outfits with pink wigs on, acting like clowns on purpose. I mean, that is all by design, ladies and gentlemen. It was the Christians that kicked King George back to England. We'll be right back with Chuck Baldwin. Your call. Stay with us. By the way, I'm going to tell you more about what's happening in courtside. There's been some new developments there coming up in the next segment, but the Attorney General of the state has said preliminarily it looks like what's going on there is illegal. No kidding. Here's the headline. Arizona town declares state of emergency. Police chief takes power. Police chief, you're fired, Mayor. Everybody's like, oh, we bow down to you, Supreme Leader. Chuck Baldwin is our guest. Look, humans haven't changed. We act the same. And if you lay down to tyranny, it is going to run over you. to the point of, in most cases, just starts killing everybody because they're like, well, no